Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here and reading through our papers. So, the what my paper is basically looking at what the state does and how it responds to the people who have been displaced due to floods. And I constructed from a place of climate change migrations because this is something very much visible in the state. The state authorities do uh, bring climate change into their discourse of policy making every now and then, and they are perhaps the only state in India which has an extensive climate change plan. They have a disaster management authority, which is talking about climate change, which is talking about how the floods are getting intensified and everything. So there's this whole policy gamut which is there. And I look at that how this international negotiations on climate change and refugees and migrations translates into the subnational environment in the state of Assam. And so in my paper, I argue basically that uh, uh, so basically what I argue is that the complexity of migration and belonging and citizenship in the subnational spaces is ignored in the policy debates on climate migrations. And I further argue that the inclusive climate future is basically to recognize these institutional barriers, which is also restricting the citizenship to certain people who are living in vulnerable geographies. Um, so the first part of my paper, I discuss the overall literature which is there in the climate change migration debate, and then I come down to the point where I say that I utilize the essence of politics of migration and belonging and conflict to evaluate the governance of climate migration at a subnational level. And I use the de-voter list of the state of Assam to basically geo-visualize how the migrations are happening, where the people are most where the rates of disenfranchisement is larger. So in this regard, I discussed the already existing literature on displacement and the dynamics of climate vulnerability of Assam, and also the dynamics of the migration in Assam, which is not just environmentally motivated, but also there's a lot of political and conflict-based migrations there. And there's this whole always a omnipresent question of who exactly is a migrant and who exactly belong to the state. The thing is that because this question itself is institutionalized through the de-voter process and now through NRC, it makes it more complex when it comes to deliverance of policies. Because as I show through this geovisualization, and I'm sorry, I realized after I sent the paper that the matrix that I used missed certain characters. So it has to be read from 0 to 99 and 100 to 199 in the page there. Um, what I show through this geovisualization is like some of the areas where well, it's actually the list itself. So the list itself sort of shows that the areas where the rate of disenfranchisement is more is also the areas which are regularly flooded, and erosion is rate of erosion is quite high in those areas. And the contestation of who belongs to these areas is always there. So then I come to the web of policies which are there in terms of disaster management and giving relief to these people who the state also considered to be a victim somehow, and also considered to be victims of climate change in its own language. So I come to those web of policies, and I through the interviews that I had with the state there, I showed that they have a lot of policies in place, quite sometimes more fragmented, sometimes more streamlined because of the Disaster Management Act. But they do have the policies. The problem is to identify who should be the subject of care in the state. And because this question of who is the subject of care, who is the citizen, is itself contested, so the state can very easily assume that no, this is not my headache, and move on from there. So this politics of the state care is very much embedded in everything that the state of Assam does for people it at one place considered to be victim, and on the same time also considered simultaneously also considered to be illegal settlers. So in conclusion, I just come back to Hannah Ardern's point that that there's people may have right people can only have a right when they are part of a political community, and if this political community itself is complex and complicated, the right to belonging in this political community itself is contested, then it's hard to basically bring in any law or any kind of structure to say that this is how we can protect people from climate change migrations, or this is what we can do in terms of legal policy aspects. So yeah, that is a nutshell about it. Um, yeah, and I'm looking forward to your comments.